Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we're going to talk a little bit about the newly released Jeff League. So leagues were a pretty hot topic last time, in part due to the exploit about like win trading and all the stuff that went on there. We did recently get our compensation for that as well, including the Deadpool emote in the border, but they're back for another run at it, Jeff League, and we have the rewards up here on screen. Looks like the top 3 rewards this time are going to be those red borders, red map borders, I think they're called, just the base red. And the person who gets the very first spot gets a premium mystery variant, while the players lower down get regular mystery variants. There are also different border rewards for some of the lower tiers here, where the neon pink or neon purple border is going to be gifted for people a bit lower down, as well as Jeff boosters, which I'm sure everyone is very excited about. Who doesn't have enough Jeff boosters already, right? Anyway, I wanted to provide some thoughts and some tips on how to do the best that you can in your league to get these rewards. Now, the first tip is one that I think is very silly, but it's one I'm going to be making use of, and it's that if you haven't already, don't join a league right away. If your goal is to have the easiest time possible, I think you just plainly get rewarded for waiting, don't play a game, wait a handful of hours. Hell, you could even wait until it's halfway over in a day from now. And I think you're very likely to get players who are not grinders. They're not people who are going to take it super seriously. You'll probably have an easier time getting points. You might be wondering, how do they fix the win trading? Did they actually adjust the system? Did they adjust the points? Did they do things to make it so people can't win trade? And well, the simple answer is they slapped a band-aid on it of saying, hey, you cannot participate in leagues in Conquest, which I think is a terrible decision. There are a bunch of players who prefer to play in Conquest post finishing their infinite grind. Some people don't even do the infinite grind and spend a lot of time in Conquest. That's just the way they prefer to play and engage with the game. And for a mode that generally has been advertising itself as, hey, you don't need to do anything extra, you just need to play the game, it feels like that is just not the case with this current league, and I think that is a shame. I imagine this comes from the fact that there was a limited amount of time between the leagues, and I'm guessing they didn't have enough time to edit their systems or figure out a new system, which, like, I can understand, but I don't think axing Conquest entirely was the way to go about doing this. I think at the very least what they could have done is get rid of Proving Grounds and Silver Conquest counting, but still potentially have Gold Conquest count for those who want to earn their points there. But alas, that is not the decision they ended up going with, so big Fs out there for the Conquest gamers. If you want to participate in leagues and earn points and get those rewards, looks like you're going to have to play ladder. And honestly, I also just dislike that decision personally. I think that's a really lame decision. Aside from the fact that it casts out an already kind of neglected portion of the player base and people who enjoy Conquest, leagues being only relevant to ladder right now creates a very uneven experience for players. What if you get mixed with a player who is at a much lower rank and is facing bots, and you're in Infinite and you're not facing bots? They're going to have a much easier time than you. What if you're higher up on the Infinite ladder as opposed to someone who's way down in the low ranks? They're probably going to have an easier time getting points. It's just like a very imbalanced system. It's inherently anti-competitive, which, like, not super surprising. Snap generally doesn't try to treat itself as this super competitive game, but it's weird that they try and put on this mask that leagues is supposed to be this, competitive way to engage with Snap when a lot of the decisions they're making around it feel anything but competitive. So, like, they need to figure out what they actually want this to be. Do they want it to be a real competitive thing? And if so, they have, like, a variety of changes they kind of need to make in order to actually have it reflect some real competitive integrity, like they talked about in the last post they made about the exploit during the last leagues. Or do they want it to be this casual thing? Or do they want it to be this casual thing that people don't have to like focus on and put a lot of effort into? It just feels like they don't really have a clear goal for what they want this feature to be. Now, there is no emote this time around, so I think people are going to be a lot less focused on getting these rewards. Some of the cosmetic focused people will probably still want these borders because the red borders are quite nice, and they're ones that you can't really buy elsewhere presently. They were just rewards through the diner, so getting more of those is pretty nice for those who want to make use of them. And we still don't see an option for the premium leagues like they talked about last time. It sounds like there's going to be a league pass to get in a premium version of leagues, where presumably you will get non-cosmetic rewards. I think that's where they're likely to put some progression-focused rewards as opposed to the regular leagues where I think they'll keep it more cosmetic-focused. So yeah, big takeaways from here. Do not play Conquest if your goal is to get the leagues done. If you want to kind of game the system a little bit and potentially have easier people to play against, wait to play a game to join a league. I'm sure it's probably going to be too late for some people who have already played a game and whatnot, and I'm sorry about that, but unfortunately, I get this information as it comes out, so couldn't really do too much ahead of time to warn people, sadly. With that out of the way, let's take a look at some of the decks that I would recommend playing to maximize those points and get ahead in your league. So looking at the decks that I think people should be playing to get those maximum points, we can't not talk about Arishem. Arishem is still really, really good. Deck hasn't changed that much. Did get the addition of Man-Thing, which was a powerful addition to the deck. I mean, Man-Thing in general at 4/7 is really, really strong, so being able to play it a turn earlier in Arishem is even better. But this deck really hasn't changed too much in the wake of the nerfs to Arishem. You have your big threats and things like Blob and Eliath. I think you could even go with a third 6-drop if you really want to, in place of one of the 3s here, like Cassandra Nova, if you don't really like having that for the Loki matchup, or Copycat if you just don't have that card. I think sneaking in a Dr. Doom here is also not a bad idea if you want. And it even has synergy with Man-Thing because it lets you get a 5-power Doombot that won't get reduced in the Man-Thing lane while spreading your power out through the board. Hasn't really changed too much though. This deck's pretty much the same as it was before. You scam people with Loki, you hit people with tech cards, you use Legion to scam locations, Alioth and Blob finish out the game, Mockingbird's just a stat stick rewarding you for playing all these cards that didn't start in your deck. Arishem still one of the best decks in the game, so if you just want to jam something that is efficient and makes it trickier for your opponent to reliably snap into you, Arishem's a really good call for this event. Speaking of Man-Thing, one deck I've found a lot of success with him in is this High Evo Junk deck. Now, calling this a High Evo deck is probably a little bit of a stretch. We're literally only running High Evolutionary for the Abomination, but also the 4/6 body isn't too bad either nowadays. But in general, this is more of a Clog deck than an Evo deck. We just have Abomination there for a bit more synergy and payoff with Hazmat. It's possible you could adapt this deck a bit to be more High Evo focused, but I think in the current environment, going in on a lot of the High Evo cards just isn't as strong as it used to be. Hashtag buff High Evo, please. But going in on the Clog strategy, I think, is a lot more effective. In the wake of the recent nerfs to things like Nocturne, Magic, I think, is finding a bit more success as there are generally less location hate cards going around, so you can more reliably get to that turn 7, which, if any deck appreciates it, it's decks that like to clog things up, or also just getting that Hazmat Ajax combo to totally blow out a lane. We have your standard Clog stuff here in White Widow and Green Goblin, Titania to combo with them, Debris to fill up the board, Viper to send a small body over to continue helping to fill things up, and Kate Bishop Hawkeye for those additional like decently statted 1-drops that will sometimes give us an Acid Arrow to help with the Clog plan. There are a lot of different ways you can make use of Ajax in this metagame. Card is really strong, but in general, the Clog package is one I've found the most success with. If combo stuff is more your speed, I think Mr. Negative is actually in a really good spot right now as well. This is another one where I think in general it has a pretty good time into Arishem specifically, so if you're seeing a lot of Arishem on the ladder, this is a pretty decent answer to it. You do just have to be a little bit mindful of incoming Elias, as that's kind of their main way of dealing with this kind of deck, since negative does go for that big pop-off at the end of the game. But this one is focused around just getting some really big stats on the board. We're using our Wong and our Mystique in combination with things like Cassandra Nova and Sage after that negative flip to get really, really high stats on individual card, and then we can copy it with Taskmaster. We have just an absolute abundance of cards that end up getting negative flipped to 0, so Jane Foster helps us be able to draw all of them, and then we just have the classic mainstay Mr. Negative staples like Psylocke and Ravonna to help ramp him out, and Iron Man for another valuable Mystique copy. Another deck that's really good at hating on Arishem is the Athena Darkhawk deck, where you just have all the cards Arishem really hates to see, as well as a reliable way of protecting them in Cosmo. So we're adding rocks to the opponent's deck to make it harder for them to get the key cards they want when you're not facing Arishem. It does do a little versus Arishem, but statistically they're not going to draw those rocks anyway. But that doesn't really matter because we have Cassandra Nova, Darkhawk, Mystique as ways of just massively outpowering them, assuming those cards aren't getting dealt with by tech. And then we just have the small scalers package to help round out our power in things like Kitty, Angela, and Athena. Copycat, definitely a flex spot. I like the power and flexibility of this card, but it is also one that could be easily replaced with something like Juggernaut. Another deck that I think is flying a little bit under the radar right now is Discard. One thing I've really liked about Discard is it has a big advantage against Loki, as they typically can't use your cards nearly effectively as you can the vast majority of the time. This is one I had a lot of success with, and I think if you're seeing a lot of Loki and to a lesser extent Arishem, it's actually way, way better than a lot of people are giving it credit for right now. Not too much to say about the general game plan. If you played one game of Discard, I think you've played them all, where you're just trying to get that big apocalypse, trying to get multiple swarms, get down that free Proxima Midnight. It's pretty straightforward. Number one question I get about decks like this is, can I replace Meek? Meek seems to be the one a lot of people don't have. And I think you can replace him pretty easily with something like Wolverine or Nebula or the Collector or something like that. Proxima, also one people don't often have and ask about replacements for. I think she's a bit harder to replace, but if you are looking for a Meek and Proxima replacement, I've seen some people have success using Collector and Helicarrier. Silver Surfer's another deck I think falls into that category like Discard, where people don't fully respect the massive amount of power output it can have, and it seemed to be putting up some very real and impressive stats over on Untapped. This is the build that I think has the most potential. Some people like to run Sarah in place of Hope. I think Hope is just better because you're less weak to like tech like Mobius, and you're not as harmed by like locations that might make it hard for you to play your Sarah. Also, Hope getting the Surfer buff is a nice addition as well. But yeah, the nice thing about Silver Surfer decks is cards are generally replaceable, where you're just putting in the best threes you have access to. This is the way I would play it if you have access to all these cards, but if you're missing some of the more expensive cards like Copycat or Shaw, you definitely can consider some more budget 3-drop replacements. Some ideas for other things you could consider here are cards like Mobius, Juggernaut, Cosmo, things like that. And last but not least, we have Loki. Loki just being an absolute powerhouse in the format right now. Kind of one of the best 3-drops in the game, just to slam into almost any mid-range deck, really. You don't really need to focus on synergy with Loki anymore. It's just a good card you can slam into most generic mid-range decks. And this deck is basically a textbook generic mid-range deck, where you're just trying to play the most efficient power for the cost. You have a small scalers package in Athena, Kitty, Angela that also helps you make sure you're curving out to enable your Wiccan, enable your speed. Maria Hill also helps out with that curve out plan, as does Nico Minoru. Hawkeye, Kate Bishop does the same kind of thing, where you're just getting powerful cards that help you fill out that curve so you're getting the most benefit you can out of your other cards. Cassandra Nova is the nod towards the Arishem decks out there. Speed is just a generically good 3-power card. I'll have a video going up tomorrow talking about speed decks. This is one of them, and whether or not I think this card is worth getting. TLDR is that I don't think most people need to get this card, but he is pretty good in the right deck. However, he is also super replaceable just by any 3-drop of your choice. If you want to jam in a Copycat or a Nocturne or Gladiator or whatever, super replaceable card here. He's just being played as a stat stick. Loki's the powerhouse of the deck. Wiccan enables even grosser things when you have that excess energy, such as cheating out in early Eliath, spamming out more of your cheap cards, or playing even more cards off of your Loki. And then Ultron is the other big 6-drop to help close out the game. Very flexible spot here. You can run whatever 6-drop you want in this spot. It doesn't have to be Ultron. It could be a Magneto. It could be a Red Hulk. It could be a Mockingbird. Really comes down to personal preference. And yeah, those are my tips and decks for dominating the Jeff League. Let me know what you think about the Jeff League in the comments below. Like I've expressed earlier on in the video, I think there are a lot of flaws here, and it's something I hope to see them improve upon in the future because, well, it feels like leagues just aren't really living up to their maximum potential right now, especially when they're alienating a whole section of the player base in Conquest enjoyers. That's going to wrap it up for this video, though. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.